Cool.
Okay, so I'll start
Welcome,
with the
everyone.
demo.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and Kushal, I was actually sorry. I was actually going to ask Mark to give an intro on requirements management, but I think Cormac actually just did and we didn't record it, of course, but you did a pretty good intro on the business value of requirements management. You want to just kind of repeat what you had said before we started recording?
Sure. So, from a marketing perspective, and to the public, we talk a lot about the value of a single application, having everything in one place and having all the stages of your life cycle in the same place. And I think that this, to me, is a really good example of what you can do when all of that information is together.
Awesome. All right, Kushal, you want to go ahead and start the demo?
Yep, so I'll share my screen. Yeah, so I'm in a GitLab shell project. I have to zoom in the page, so let me know if you still find it not clear or visible enough. So in the GitLab shell project, we have 37 requirements. We already have made the changes regarding the counts. So we show exact counts of available requirements for the project in the tabs as well as in the navbar. These counts update dynamically, so you don't have to reload the page in order to see the updated counts based on the interactions you do. So on single page, we'll be showing 20 requirements to begin with. This is the same count that we are using for issues and MRs. And one difference that you would notice that if there are more than 20 requirements, the pagination controls that are available at the bottom of the page do not show page numbers. So there's a known GraphQL limitation, like we cannot have a random access to individual pages. We have to traverse through all the pages in order to reach end of the list or beginning of the list. So if I click on next, you would notice that the skeleton loading animation shows up and then items show up. And the loading animation also reflects the number of items that are going to be visible. So there aren't any abrupt jumping of controls within the page. So if I click on previous, we have 20 items on the page. So you would notice that we saw 20 skeleton loading animations on the page and then the items showed up. So that way it feels like a refined UX on the listing part of things. Now going to the archived page. So switching between the tabs is something that will require page reload because that's how we are doing it for other places as well, be it epics, issues, or merge requests. And all the requirements that are archived currently will be shown here. One difference that you would notice is that if we go to the open tab, there are two action buttons and both of them are represented by icons. So we have an edit action and the archive action. As far as archive tab is concerned, we have a button with a label reopen. So I'm working with Nick regarding which icon to use here. For now, we don't have appropriate icon to show. So we are at least starting in the first iteration, we'll be using reopen as the label and not any icon, so that we are not blocked by any design decisions. So now I'll go ahead and create a new requirement and we'll go through individual flows like updating a created requirement, then archiving it and then reopening it back again. So this new requirement button shows up on the open tab. So if we go to the archive tab, you would notice that the button hides. So we do not want basically to show new requirement form in places where newly created requirement won't show up. So for example, if I'm on the archive tab, and if I still allow user to create a new requirement from the archive tab, technically that requirement goes into the open tab. It doesn't show up in the archive tab. So we don't want to create any confusion, like if user creates a requirement and then expects that requirement to show up within the same list without reloading the page. So in order to simplify it, we are simply hiding the new requirement button on places where it is not supposed to be. So now when I click on new requirement, I'll just call it foobar and I'll click on create. There will be an animation on the button. Obviously, since we are demonstrating it on local GDK, so everything happens fast. So the requirement got created and we refresh the list of the items and the new requirement is just created here. It will reflect the creation timestamp and the updated timestamp. In case it is newly created, both of them are same. Now, if I want to edit it, I can click on edit and this is how the edit form looks like. So foobar hello, I'll just change its title, click on save, and there you go, changes of hello show up. Now notice these counters as I start interacting with individual requirements. So right now we have 27 open requirements and total of 38 requirements. Now if I archive this requirement, you would notice that the count reduced by 1. So we don't have to reload the page. The counter gets updated based on whether you create a new requirement or update an existing requirement. And the moment I archived that requirement, it went away from this list and is now available in the archived page. And here you can see that it is on top of this list. Now, if I click on reopen, same thing happens. It will go back to the open tab and goes away from here. And going back to open tab shows up right here. So these are the 3 workflows that we are aiming for. The 3 items that I mentioned in the agenda, which aren't available here, is that one design proposal is that when new requirement gets created, we want to highlight that requirement on the list because we are aware that newly created requirements show up at the top of the page, but it might not be obvious for new users. So we want to highlight it using some color. So those designs are already in place. I'll implement those changes by next week. So before 12.10 is frozen on 17th of April, we have all of those changes in master branch. So that is one thing. Another one is that the additional actions that you do, like updating the title or archiving or reopening the requirement, we want to show toast message at the bottom of the page to reflect what exactly happened. So that is also something that we will be covering in the upcoming MRs. And same thing goes for empty states. Like if I visit a project where there aren't any requirements available at all, currently user would see a generic empty state, like it won't show much information like what requirements are. Like you are presented with the requirements and 0 as the navbar option. And when I click on requirements, ideally we are supposed to show new requirement action right on the empty state page itself. Like this page here, it will be explaining what requirements are as per the proposed design. So like if there are no requirements on the page, then you would see this, like there are no open requirements. But in case there are no requirements created at all for this project, we want this message to explain what requirements as a feature is. And instead of showing this new requirement button here, we'll be showing it somewhere here, and user can click on that button and create a requirement for the project. And same thing goes for other places. Like if I click on this all tab, it will show all the requirements, both archived and open requirements. And the actions that are available are on the individual basis. Like once we have the listing loaded here, you would notice that, okay. Yeah, so obviously it's a demo and no demo is complete without anything broken. So I'll obviously check what's going on with this all tab. Technically, it is supposed to load in all the requirements instead of not rendering anything. So that's one thing. But obviously, this is the basic demo, like what features are expected to work on the requirements management. So yeah, that is it for the demo. Any questions so far?
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say thank you so much. This looks awesome, and this has been some really fantastic work here. I really appreciate all the hard work you guys have put into this.
Yeah, and also I'm not sure if Jan is on the call, but yeah, I have been bothering Jan quite a lot for a lot of backend questions. So kudos to Jan as well for working on backend of it. So.
I noticed one small thing there is in the pagination, we're still showing the page 2, page 1, which doesn't seem to be used anymore. Do we want to remove that? Or?
Yeah. So what happens in this case is that, so right now we are having only 26 requirements and the 27 requirements to be exact, and we are only having 2 pages. I'll quickly demonstrate why that page number is still important, although it is not used directly on pagination component itself, but we are still utilizing it to determine when to disable next or previous buttons. So let me change our default page size to 5 so that it is more easier to understand. Yeah, so I'll change the page size to 5, and that way we'll have more pages to work with. Let me clear up all these query params. So yeah, one more thing that I forgot to mention was that all the pages are permalinked. So if you have more than one page of items, and if you are traversing through pages, You can copy the URL, share it with someone, and they are guaranteed to land on the exact same page that you were viewing. So that way we are preserving the functionality of maintaining the page position essentially. So yeah, apparently using Zoom and GDK together is not so easy for MacBook to handle. So I'll close it meanwhile.
That's okay for me. I know, I understand that we need that to
Yeah.
display the.
So the idea of having that page
previous
number is that
email.
like, yeah, so like if there are 5 pages in the list and if user has already traversed through third page, then the URL will include page 3 in the param. So if someone copies that URL and opens that page again, they will notice that both next and previous buttons are enabled because user is in the middle of the page position. So if user is not on the first or last page, then we need to make sure that both the buttons are available to access.
And it may also help in the future when, because I think the plan is to eventually add page number pagination to this once we figure it out on the back end how to do that. So that may help having that page number already there for future case.
Yeah. So like notice we are on the third page, and if I click on next once more, it will take me all the way to the last page, and now next button is disabled. So if I'm on the fourth page and if I copy this URL or essentially duplicate this tab, it will land me directly on the fourth page and will make sure that the next button gets disabled at appropriate position. So if I click on next again, on sixth page, it gets disabled. So that way we are preserving the page position. And in last plan weekly, I also mentioned like how to handle browser back and forward buttons. So that is preserved. Like if I click on back, it will reload the page and it will drop me on page 5, page 1 directly in case I am on a different page position. So that way user is not affected by how back browser back button works, even if they are traversing through pages and updating the URL. So that's all I had for the demo. Now on to the workflow section.
Yeah, I think it's me next. Thanks, Kushal. Like, I always thought live demos were a great addition to this, but the live coding part was especially edge of seat stuff. Like, so thanks very much. Yeah, look, I don't know who in the team is aware of this yet, but we are working on the first real-time feature for GitLab that is real-time assignees in the sidebar. Yeah, so we have a working group for this. A lot of the application work is already done by Heinrich. But there's an opportunity now for the team to get involved. We want to own basically as much of this as we can. And the first deployment of this is going to require Kubernetes, which also requires Helm charts and containerization. So if this is something speaking especially to the engineers, if this is something you're particularly interested in, please get in touch with me because we'll obviously need more of the team to get involved than just one person. And also it's a really good opportunity to have a real world example of a feature deployed right to the end of the chain, you know, from application level through Dockerization all the way through to deployment with Kubernetes. And not just to learn it academically, but to actually deploy something useful with it. So yeah, I know a lot of people watch this call async in their spare time. So please reach out if you want to be involved in that. And thanks, Alex, for jumping in right away. I have the next item as well. So there have been we've kind of talked about these kind of things at length, but again, I just wanted to vocalize in front of everyone who's involved in the plan stage where we've kind of been doing things that like don't scale, right? So with regards to some features, the Jira importer is the obvious one. So we've kind of created a Slack channel. I do bi-weekly updates and the PMs do bi-weekly updates on the progress, their CO interest. We have epics that we constantly groom and reprioritize. And we also built a proof of concept first and then broke the feature down from that proof of concept. And we delivered the Jira importer. I have to say, like Alexandru and Yarka have delivered the Jira importer in a very short space of time. But there are other examples of this as well. Requirements management is another good example where Mark has done office hours every week and provided training materials. And we're starting to do something similar with burn-up charts. So I'm kind of wondering, like, what are people's opinions on this approach? It's not sustainable and it doesn't scale for every feature that we want to release. But, you know, as Paul Graham says, you know, do things that don't scale to start with. And then hopefully we won't need these in 3 milestones, 4 milestones. So yeah, I just want to put it out there for sort of open discussion. What do people think of these things? Are they only helpful for me, or are they helpful for other people as well to follow the work?
As an engineer, I think it's helpful for me to be able to focus on something like as a deliverable. I had this feeling before that I'm not exactly sure what some of the deliverables are for a specific release, like the high level kind of view, so to say. And yeah, like being able to have these focus groups, so to say, on specific deliverables, I feel like it's helpful. Maybe later on, once we kind of polish the workflow and so on, we will not need this many things like specific channel or something like that. But yeah, it felt like it does help for the Jira importer at least. It did feel really good because you have a specific place to ask a specific question on this specific feature.
I was just going to mention the concept behind the office hours, and the reason that I kind of chose that approach for the requirements management was the idea that once the development work is primarily completed on that, I was hoping the office hours would then transition to marketing and sales teams so that they could come and ask questions from their particular groups that they interface with. And if necessary, we could then pull in engineering if required, but not necessarily as an everyday thing. So I was hoping that would theoretically scale slightly better. It would more or less morph into something slightly different was the idea behind it. We'll see how that plays out. I'm game to keep that as sort of an experiment and see, you know, where it leads us, and if it's something we want to keep doing in the future. And if it isn't useful, then that's fine. We can always cancel it.
What about with respect to collaboration? I mean, Alexandru, the Jira importer work, it was, you know, you kind of led the development, and Yarka was able to help with things like the metadata and to basically come in on parts of the development. Did these kind of things help with that? Was that purely because it was broken down a certain way? You know, a lot of our issues still seem to be one developer from each discipline works on the issue. So I'm wondering, does this really help?
Yeah, I think that's more a question for Yarka in this specific instance, but like I think it does help because again, especially I would, for myself, if I would be joining a feature in development already, it would be helpful to know like where to ask this specific question. If like we do have the development channels and you can ask all sorts of questions when it is very focused on a specific deliverable or task, you'd reach to the people with the expertise much faster. If you feel like so.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I think you have the next point.
Yeah, on the same theme of the collaboration, we do talk about stuff here and we kind of want to get feedback. I was wondering, to me personally, it doesn't feel like very collaborative to have the agenda and to have people that do not attend the call come into agenda and try to get feedback. So I was wondering if we should actually pull this into a issue of some sort, maybe a separate project for the plan meetings or something like that. So I don't know if what everyone's thinking about that. So to just encourage collaboration, to easier collaboration on this type of meetings. And
I wonder, could we reuse the plan project that we have? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, using the project is okay. Maybe we can have a label, like to know what issues you should be looking at when you want to, like when you wonder if you are expected to give some feedback on something.
yeah. So I'm wondering, because the agenda is nice for like note, or the Google Doc is nice for like real time note taking, and using it as an agenda that way. But I agree that to kind of encourage collaboration on some of the things that we talk about, it's probably best to, at some point, ideally right after the meeting, we go and create issues for them. And then we further, instead of continuing communication in the Google Doc, let's continue those conversations within an issue.
Maybe we can automate it, create a script that will create the issue out of the Google Docs. That would be nice.
You're the PLC engineer. Cool. Any other comments on that? Questions? All right.
And
JH. John
That was
Hope.
me. Yeah. I'm glad I specified the H, because there's more than one John on the call, right? So, isn't there? Yeah. Anyway, cool. So yeah, that's just a reminder for eligible engineers to please sign up for the on-call slots for May. I'm the facilitator for May, and I think Changzheng is the backup facilitator. So yeah, anyway, we're still down a few slots. So if you haven't done yet, please look at the doc and pick some slots.
Cool. Anyone else have anything else? Yeah. All right. Great meeting. Talk to you all later. Bye.